Good evening and welcome to the July edition of 100 Pictures of Honey. For the first time, it's a 4-pack of readers instead of a 3-pack. So you're going to get lots of wonderful words tonight from 4 very different and all very talented writers. And if there's a theme for this evening for me, I guess the word I would use would be family. I am connected to these people in various ways, and I love all of their work. And tonight, I think you're going to very easily see why. So I will just drop in the chat really quickly information about the reading series, where you can find us on social media. And this is a one-woman show here, and I do pay the readers. So any tiny bit of donation, if you are so inclined or able, is appreciated. My PayPal is there on the screen, and I will put it on at the end again. And if you don't or don't want to, also absolutely fine. We just want to bring you the words of these wonderful writers this evening. So all 4 of these people have kind of become a part of my extended poetry family in different ways. And our first reader is going to be Fox Henry Frazier. So what I'm going to be doing for each reader is I'm dropping their bio and links to where to get their books or the other projects that they are involved in into the chat. And sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my computer here. So I'm going to do that there we go. Okay. I'll drop all the long kind of official information about each writer into the chat and then give them a brief, little bit more personal introduction, and then hear their wonderful. So with Fox, our friendship developed through poetry, but has gone beyond that over the last few years. Since we're far away from each other geographically, mostly that happens online, which is okay. Fox is fiercely smart, always willing to listen or encourage any kind of project that I have, give feedback, and like the foxes in one of her poems, her ideas in her writing move like flashes of bright auburn moving fluidly through the late spring snow. I know that her last full-length book is The Raven King, which is wonderful, and the link is in the chat. But tonight I think she's going to read actually from a book that is another brand new book, which is coming out, I believe, at the end of this month, called Weeping in the Tropical Moonlight, because nobody told her. I think I got that right. So without further ado, Fox, all yours.
Thank you so much, Donna. And thank you for everything you do to put this series together. I'm so happy to be here and be part of it. All right, so I am going to read from Weeping in the Tropical Moonlit Night because nobody's told her. I'm going to use a little bit of my time to talk about the book because it comes out next week officially, and it seems unfair to expect anyone to know what it's about because no one could have read it yet. So let's see. I guess I'll say it's predicated on the concept that a mermaid one day sees a human being and is just fascinated, and she thinks, oh my God, like what an enchanting, beautiful creature, and just, absolutely ensorcelled by him. And so she uses her shape-shifting abilities to turn herself into a betta fish in order to get closer to him, with the idea that proximity yields the potential for creating some kind of bond. And it works. She follows him around for a while, and she sort of like worshipfully observes him. And eventually she must catch his eye at some point because he scoops her out of the water and takes her home. And she really very possibly hasn't thought through all the ways in which this could end poorly for her. And he puts her into a crystal bowl and he adds some water into it. And then he just goes about his life and he sort of forgets her. And she's now stuck in this crystal bowl. And so she's just watching him. Maybe doesn't go quite as well for her in the end as she might have hoped it would. And that's where the book begins. That's the jumping off point. So that's kind of the context into which I'm inviting you guys. And I guess the only other thing I'll say about it before I read from it is that I did not intend to have 2 books come out this year. I wrote this book this year without much planning beforehand. I had to learn kind of a hard lesson earlier this year about the things that can happen when you and another person admit that you feel a certain kind of connection to one another. And that person dedicates time to cultivating certain feelings in you, but then for any number of reasons, in the end, isn't really able to honor those feelings. I think that we're sort of trained by society to seek external validation from other people about our feelings and our insights and, you know, where we fit into the world. And I think it can be especially difficult if the connection in question is maybe a romantic one or has the potential for romance. But the answer that I ultimately came to is that if another person seeks out feelings in you that they, for whatever reason, then find themselves unable to honor, then you can honor your own feelings yourself. And I, like I said, it was kind of a hard lesson to learn, but I don't know, I thought it was important, so I wrote a book about it. So without further ado, I will read some of that book to you now. Your song turned my body to a pool of maple syrup, rivulets spreading through snowfall in the midst of a wintry field. When your song ebbed, I became a betta fish, rose-tailed, iridescent, filling my crystal bowl with magnificent twists, whirling like a seraph, glittering, celestial, enamored by every glimpse of my own billowing fins, their kaleidoscopic prism, vermilion, olive, cornflower, indigo, amethyst, sunrise, and rose-gilded edge. Your dark sweater suited your quiet. I stopped spinning to watch you in the kitchen, pot on the stove. You were preparing lentils, humming in a low key. Weeping in a tropical moonlit night because nobody's told her. I wondered if my eyes were opened too wide. I could see so much of you. Did it make me look cartoonish? Stupid? Your hair darkened in the dying light. Your hands moved thoughtfully with skill and attention. Then you quickened by nature and rhythm. I was entranced. What did you think about? I suppose for you, there was no point in sharing such things with me, no matter how I moved or how much of my eyes I filled up with your light or your shadow. The plan had always been to shift back into siren or even human for you. But now, stuck in this bowl, I was just a stupid fish. Surely you'd plucked me from the water by chance. I could have been any fish, unworthy of more than a few scattered flakes timed by your watch. Still, I watched you with fascination, blurring into reverence. The ginger pink shock of mouth you seldom opened fully, even when smiling. Your thick palms, long fingers, slender, pale, hiding swan-like violence. In truth, when you said, I'm like bombed out Belfast circa 84, never occurred to me that you might have meant on the inside. But a verdant current coursed through you too. Golden orchids spread themselves under your hands, curling into crowns. Peonies and extremists began to breathe, again, swelling ebulliently until they exploded, basking in the light you cast from your body like luminescent sweat. I too would have knelt. I followed along as you touched your own face, your beard, my water and crystal like an anchorite's veil, but eventually your song would resurface and cut through everything. Your voice deep stirring, your cadences wry and wise. Besides the song you carried, the lines around your eyes were my favorite part of you. I wanted to worship you forever. And so you put me in the river. You were gentle with me there in the almost light. You spoke to me kindly. Maybe you did hide from the things that you told me, that I couldn't stay angry at you. You looked so alone when you told me to vacate your life. Even your smile was sad. I wanted you even as you poured me out. And then, choiceless, I went. re-entered the cold, fluid thrash. I'll never forget how to be at home there. I screamed, knowing you couldn't hear me, and knowing it wouldn't make a difference if you could. I hated myself then. I wanted to transmogrify again into whatever shape could finally deserve you. Not just your hands or the lines around your eyes, but your blush when you said you wanted to kiss me. Your unsolicited advice not to self-diminish. The first time I heard your voice saying, "This is me." The giddy warmth I felt when you wrote, "I'm sitting in a thunderstorm talking to you. I was going to ask you to bewitch me, but hell, you already have." I'm not a complete fool, you know. I always knew that you were sad. I also saw all the ways in which you were strong. I saw you, and you, and you undid me. I can't help what I know. I understood the awe of what your body would feel like moving closely against my body. When you looked at me, I realize now you must have seen not a siren who shapeshifted trying to know you, but instead a pretty dumb animal. Maybe you didn't even think I was pretty. Maybe you plunked me into the bowl as a kindness because you thought I was lost. Maybe I was lost to swim after you as I did. My curiosity for you burning too quickly to desire, my want for your taste as a way to know you, imagining that if you made space for me between your arms, it would feel like being held in love or fucked by Jupiter. There were times that I knew you felt things about me. I even knew what things, but then, awkward, you said once, but endearing. Maybe I didn't know. Maybe when you looked at me, you saw a swarm of scales needing more from you than any child's fine-finned, grimy win from a carnival game could ever be worth. I wish I could say that any of this has excised my love. None of it has stopped my desire for you. I don't know if I'll ever stop being sorry that all the ways I wanted to love you were wrong. I think that's going to be all from me tonight, y'all. Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Fox. So beautifully read. We were with you every second of that reading. Such beautiful images and such a strong voice in that piece. So don't sleep on checking that out. Find Fox online or go to Yes Poetry's website within the next couple of weeks so that Weeping in the Tropical Moonlight can be yours. And you can see the whole story unfold. Our next reader is going to be Ann Hudson. I first met Ann years ago. I don't know how many years ago, when we were both taking a print class where we were making letterpress broadsides of our poems. It has to be at least 12 years ago, because I think it was when my first chapbook was coming out 12 or 13 years ago. And then I happily re-met her when I became a part of the staff of Rhino as part of the Rhino family. And as I have come to know Ann, I am very fond of her tender intelligence and her sharp humor and her beautiful writing. And to put it simply, Ann glows, which is also the name of her chapbook that she's going to read from, Glow. And I'll put all of her information in the chat so that you, after you hear her read, will also know where to find her work. So Ann, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Donna. And thank you to the Evanston Print Shop and to Rhino Poetry for bringing us together, and to Fox and Katie and Stephen. I'm honored to read with you all, and so glad to get to hear your work too. This is my latest. It's a chapbook that put out by Next Page Press. You can check them out. They are also on the interwebs. And it couldn't be more different than what Fox just read. So I'm kind of fascinated by this juxtaposition. This is one of my favorite things in poetry, is just having random things sort of crashing together. But instead of a mermaid, I've got Marie Curie and radium and death by all kinds of terrible, terrible means. So, I mean, I'm glad we started with something a lot more beautiful. However, Marie Curie really believed in radium and in the powers of radium, and believed it to be a force for good. And she was right in many ways, although radium did ultimately kill her. But I just wanted to read, while this book does investigate the radium girls who painted with radium-laced paint just after World War I and died terribly as a result of their proximity to radium, and also investigates the radium craze, whereby people ingested all manner of things. You could get butter with radium and water with radium and clothing with radium, you name it, you could get it laced with radium, because it was thought to give you a healthy glow, which it did, and then it killed you. So I'm not going to be reading those poems. I just wanted to think a little bit more about Marie Curie and I don't know, just what an awesome person she was. Before I started to do a lot of research, all I really knew about radium and Marie Curie, I knew that radium was an element, and I knew it was discovered by Marie Curie, and then I knew that Marie Curie's husband Pierre was killed by a cart. And if you believe the sort of fairy tale around her, she was devastated for the rest of her life. And while I believe that kind of grief is deep and lasts a lifetime, there was a lot more to her story, of course, than just the absence of the man that she was married with and was a scientist with. So this first poem is called Paradise. My father was also a scientist, and so it kind of comes out of that story with him at the end of his life, and investigates Marie and Pierre Curie a little bit. Paradise. The day before he died, my father whispered they were building him a new lab, bigger than he really needed. It's an honor, he confided, his hands fretting the sheets. A cup of sponges to wet his mouth stood on the nightstand. We sat quietly together, imagining a spacious workspace, white, gleaming, with glass doors shushing open, shushing closed. I stood to carry another load of laundry to the basement, where the chain tinked against the bare bulb, and crickets wheezed behind the hot water tank. After their modest wedding, Marie and Pierre Curie bicycled across Brittany. Because her simple black dress would have tangled in the spokes, she wore knickers and knee stockings and a straw boater with a narrow brim. Back in Paris, they returned to their workspace behind the School of Physics, an abandoned shed with a leaky roof, dirt floor, and a rusty cast iron stove. The light was dim. Specks of coal dust ruined days of painstaking labor. It was blazing in summer, freezing in winter, but the place was so shabby, no one thought to stop by unannounced. And when the work was going well, the hours flew by. It was here they detected two new elements, one of which she named polonium for her home country, the other radium for the energy it emitted seemingly without end. By the time I returned to my father's bedroom, he was asleep, dreaming of his paradise. Marie Curie wasn't the only one fascinated with radium, although she did. Her daughter tells a story of her going to their little shed at night after they had discovered radium, and she would just watch it glowing in the dark. There was a dancer actually from not far away from where I'm sitting. She was originally from Hinsdale, Illinois, not just outside Chicago. Before Hinsdale was even Hinsdale, I forget what it was called, but somebody's, I'm sure it was somebody's farm or something. And her name was, I think it was Louise Fuller, but she reinvented herself. She moved to Paris. She was a dancer, and she sort of took Paris by storm. And she decided, she did all these really inventive dances, and she thought it would be really cool if she could lace her dress with radium, right, make it glow. So she did contact the Curies to see if she could, I don't know, borrow radium. I'm kind of unclear as to what her concept was, but apparently she had lots of really interesting concepts. And if you get a chance, do go on YouTube and look up Loie Fuller, because her dances are really, really interesting. So this is called Electric Fairy. And it starts out with an epigraph by Loie Fuller. I suppose I am the only person who is known as a dancer, but who has a personal preference for science. Electric Fairy. How many bolts of sheer white silk were stitched together to make the dancing dress of Loie Fuller, sensation of the Folies Bergère, darling of Parisian high society, an American girl born in the outskirts of what was barely Chicago, barely a muddy crossroads. There she was in the music hall, famous for spectacle and costume, gripping the bamboo sticks slipped into pockets of her voluminous gown so she could twirl her dress into a whirlwind of fabric. Stagehands training the heavy lights on her, operating the projectors, glass plates, colored gelatins. She danced on stage alone for 45 minutes, lights searing her eyes, the audience entirely silent, then erupting in applause. It wasn't so much dance she was after as a way to understand radiance. She'd written the Curies to ask how she might fashion a garment that would generate its own light. And they'd generously written back a lengthy but discouraging response. Radium was impractical, too expensive. Soon she was knocking on their door on Boulevard Kellerman, accompanied by a pack of technicians and stagehands, begging the Curies to vanish to their lab for the day so she could set up the required environment for the radium dance she'd imagined, choreographed, and produced. For hours, she hung heavy drapes, arranged rugs, and projected colored lights she designed herself. Eventually, Fuller would take out over a dozen patents for her stage lights, her sets, her dresses, and her dances. The Curies never patented their method for rendering radium, nor its medical applications, believing radium for the good of humankind. How baffling to see light as constructed and discovered, as proprietary and universal, as illusion and as vision. How light whirls and spins, even as it seems to stay right where it is. Marie Curie addresses Pierre in her mind while she inspects the stove in the vestibule. 1906. I rush home from the train each night, the girls asleep, twisted in their bed sheets. The house has already cooled. Your father, awake in the dark, leaves me to myself. Into the stove, I layer crumpled newspapers, notes, condolence cards the world insists on sending. Then, kindling, the children gather, linden, honey locust, chestnuts. I snap twigs, bend the greens, and add the hard coal last. 6 shovelfuls, 1 for every letter of your name. I'll just read one more poem. This one is called Petite Curie. And one thing I was so surprised to find out about Marie Curie is, I mean, it's clear what a badass she is, but she did things like during the war, she devised a way to basically create these mobile X-ray units. She got wealthy patrons to donate money or vehicles, and she like, you know, pimped them out to be X-ray units, and she would drive onto the front lines and help doctors, you know, diagnose various, you know, breakages, and would even sometimes be there in the operating room. Not that there was really an operating room, but you know, stuff was in the field. She didn't know how to drive before this. She taught herself how. Such an inventive, amazing woman. And I would be terrified to meet her. You know, who would you invite to your dinner party? For a while there, I was saying Maria Montessori and Marie Curie, but I would be terrified to meet either one of them, I think. I'm so intimidated. But I would love to wait on a table where Marie Curie and Maria Montessori, we were speaking to each other, because I think they would like each other. So this is Petite Curie. It's true the radium burned her fingertips, left scars and numbness, but it was worth the work. It was worth the 3 years of strenuous labor, rendering 7 tons of pitch blende to yield a single gram of radium. The money from the Nobel Prize was only worth the laboratory it could build. The work meant everything. And once the war began, all research stopped. What if she hadn't devised and driven retrofitted military trucks to bring radiology to wounded soldiers at the front? Imagine her hair swept up off her brow, her worn black dress oily after she changed a tire or cleaned a dirty carburetor, the armband of the Red Cross on her sleeve. She taught herself anatomy. She taught herself to drive. The wounded were brought one by one to the dark room where Curie would conduct the X-ray, showing the bones and organs, showing the fragment of shell. Sometimes the surgeon would operate on the spot. For 4 years, she drove all over France, installing 200 radiological rooms, equipping 20 motor cars she begged from patrons, and transforming them into mobile X-ray units nicknamed Petite Curie. And what's more, she figured out a way to siphon off the gas that radium steadily emits, capture the radon in thin glass tubes, and transport the delicate tubes to the operating fields where surgeons could inject the radon into injured tissue. Radium was beautiful and it was good. That is the only reckoning there was. Thanks so much, Donna. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Anne. We've already got a few people in the chat saying, oh, I want to get this book. Here it is again, Glow. Next Page Press. You can find it if you missed the link above. You can find it easily online. I love those poems. And the other poems that she was talking about, the Radium Girls and the other topics in the book are just as wonderful as the ones that she read. Our next reader is Katie Manning. Katie became a part of my poetry family first as an editor when she accepted one of my poems for her journal, and has become for me a real role model for how to support other poets and how to move through what can be a strange and sometimes bitter poetry biz landscape with grace and kindness. And one of these days, we're going to find ourselves in the same physical realm. We haven't done that quite yet. And whether Katie is writing, reworking biblical language, remembering a beloved grandmother, or writing about video games, her writing is always skillful and moving and full of the same grace that she is. Time for Katie.
Thank you. I'm so honored to get to read in this reading series. And Donna, I first heard you read at AWP in Seattle, and I was wowed by your work and immediately ran and bought a copy of your book. So to get to publish your work and to get to read in your reading series is an honor. And I'm thrilled to get to read with these other poets. And I was one of the people who immediately brought up a link to your book, and I can't wait to read it. And I get to blurb Fox's chapbook, so please get a copy of that when you can. And I can't wait to hear Stephen. Such a good night. Super happy to be here. I feel like I'm in a room. I love when I have that feeling in a Zoom room. I'm like, yes, this is a good room to be in. So I was debating about doing this. I'm going to open and close with a dinosaur poem. And then in between, I'm going to read you some poems from my latest chapbook, which is called How to Play. It has this spectacular cover that was created by one of my former students who does knolling photography. Knolling is where you take all these little pictures of things and then arrange them like evenly spaced. So I think I might be the missing link, since Anne said her poems were nothing like Fox's poems. So we'll see. I'm hoping maybe I can be the missing link. So I feel like Fox had all of this desire, and Anne had all of this, kind of scientific prowess. I don't know that I have that going on, but I maybe have something in the middle with this poem. So my poem is called This Poem is About Dinosaurs. It is not about Jeff Goldblum. It is not about how much I wanted him to run his fingers gently over the back of my hand and let a drop of water slip down one way and then another, while he spoke softly to me about chaos theory in that low rumble that God created, surely intentionally designed in that man for seduction. I love dinosaurs. I hung framed pictures of dinosaurs around my bedroom and read so many dinosaur books as a child. I definitely watched Jurassic Park for the dinosaurs. I definitely felt my whole body blush when I heard Jeff Goldblum speak. I didn't stop to think if I should, but this is not about desire or about desire locked behind electric gates, as if such a force could ever be contained, as if I could ever find a way to contain it. So I don't know if it's the missing link, but maybe. All right, so a few poems from How to Play, poems inspired by games. So this was my back burner project for a decade. I was certainly not working on it ever as my main project. It was just the fun project where, I would write a poem that was inspired by a board game or a card game or a dice game, which was just kind of a fun prompt. I love games. I have, like normal people have, towels or something reasonable in their hall cabinets. And my spouse and I have games, like in all of the hall cabinets. So they're great. We have a great time, with friends. We have students over for game nights. COVID was rough there for a while. It still is rough, but we've cautiously had a few small game nights. We're working our way up to it again. So I have a lot of fodder for poems. So I'm just gonna jump in and read a few of these, and we'll see how far we get. I'm gonna start with one of my very favorites. Scattergories, a regret, for Rick and Chris. On the boat between Ireland and Scotland, all I could think about was crotchless panties. The category was articles of clothing. The letter was C. Coat, cardigan, cap, Clogs, corduroys, none of these came to me. Crotchless panties. I was sitting beside my professor, an older man who looked just like the bust of Mark Twain in his office. I could not write crotchless panties. I looked across to my friends to gain inspiration from their clothing. T-shirts, jeans, sneakers, they were no help. Crotchless panties, crotchless panties. My pen hovered over the paper, still. The last bit of sand fell. Getting off the boat, I told a friend about getting stuck on crotchless panties. He thought this was so funny that he whispered it to me over and over for the next 2 weeks of our trip. Walking into my first real castle, crotchless panties. Buying a scarf on the Royal Mile, crotchless panties. Trying vegetarian haggis, crotchless panties. Finding our professor asleep in a museum, crotchless panties. Eating curry in Oxford, crotchless panties. Tasting Earl Grey for the first time, crotchless panties. Gasping at the sight of Big Ben, crotchless panties. Standing beside C.S. Lewis's grave, crotchless panties. The words crotchless panties haunted me, a mantra I couldn't control. Back in America, I read my professor's poem that was shaped like a breast on the page. He was edgier than I thought. To this day, I regret not using the words that came to me when I needed them. All right, I think since it's summer, thank you. Since it's summer, I'll go for this next one. And also, we just played this game. So this is Dominion, Summer League. Dominion is a deck building game. And this poem is not obviously about a game, which is kind of a fun thing, I think, about the poem. But the way that the poem uses the game is that it takes some of the names of cards from the game, and it uses those words sprinkled throughout the poem. So if you know the game, it's kind of a, it's maybe a little bit of an insider connection. So words like feast and festival are cards within the game Dominion. So Dominion, Summer League. It took us 2 years to see frogs in the swamp we saw daily. Our eyes weren't trained to spot their eyes, dark lumps just above the dark water. But one day, there they were. They played their mottled music while we walked in circles, while we tried out baby names and my body expanded. At a festival, I saw people feast on frog legs. I felt sick. These creatures were too precious to eat. They're like swamp bunnies, I said, and you reminded me that people eat rabbits too. All right, let's do this one for our literary crowd here. There's a game called Tales of the Arabian Nights, and it's sort of a choose your own adventure board game. So literary folks tend to enjoy it very much. So this is Shahrazad's last words. Everything is lies and luck. There's no right way to make a wish or beg for release. Hide your face and pray you won't be noticed. This might not be enough to save you. Do not imagine marriage will save you. Do not imagine you won't be found, even if you hide in a palace of 1,000 closets. Do not drink from any magical springs. Do not eat anything. Everything will change you. All you can do is roll the dice and hope you won't be changed into something far worse than whatever you already are. The next poem is called King of Tokyo Home Expansion. And King of Tokyo is one of my favorite games to introduce people to because I get to tell them that it's like Yahtzee with monsters. And that's the best introduction to that game. So King of Tokyo Home Expansion. Don't let my face fool you. Its smile cute as a baby bunny in a pink robot suit. I've got claws. And you, I can turn you so suddenly from loved spouse to villain lizard, ape, or alien. I can make you my monster. We wear each other down, tear metal arms and extra heads away until we find a human heart or two, unleash some better version of ourselves. And then I think I will skip ahead to just a couple more poems. I'm going to read this one that I wasn't sure how much my son would love this poem because it begins with his fears, but it's his favorite poem in the book. And so if he is with me and I'm reading, he will ask me to read this one. And I love that he loves it. So this is Zombie Dice during election week with permission from my son. My 9-year-old lists out his fears. Death, guns, Zool from Ghostbusters, drowning, horror movies, fires, zombies. Then he asks to play zombie dice. We roll brains, footprints, and shotgun blasts. He takes the risk to roll again and gets hit by 3 explosions, losing his little pile of brains and ending round 1 with his eyes on the empty patch of carpet in front of him. But his luck takes a turn in round 3 when tiny feet let him run and re-roll until he piles up 9 more brains at once and wins. We high-five over the mound of brains, and I laugh while he bounces with joy over his win, my loss. This is the closest I come to feeling joy too. We gather all of the brains and blasts back into the cup and begin again. So as promised, I'm going to close with one more dinosaur poem. This is a poem that was just published in the last week or so in a brand new publication called the Mesozoic Reader, which is entirely dinosaur poems. So this is When My Son Was a Parasaurolophus. And this came about because my son's preschool in the summer named the different classes with dinosaur names. So each class was a different dinosaur. So When My Son Was a Parasaurolophus. His blonde curls served as his cranial crest. His high notes carried for miles. He ran on 2 legs with the other Parasaurolophus juveniles, then crawled on all 4s up and under the big slide. And every day the little lizards built a nest inside the old tire under the shade tree. And together they guarded their invisible eggs from the invisible predators that they knew would come. Some of them had heard the word extinct, but what 4-year-old can fathom such complete absence? Parasaurolophus disappeared during the late Cretaceous period, long before the asteroid hit. My son would lose both grandparents to a car accident later that Parasaurolophus summer. This all happened 5 years ago. I mean, it's been 75 million years. Thank you.
Forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Katie. What a joy to hear you read those poems. And if you loved that book, obviously check out Katie's website. And her other books are all wonderful as well. And one of her chapbooks is available as a free download on the Agape website as well. So check out all of Katie's work. Our last reader tonight, last but not least, is Stephen Sanchez. And Stephen is a part of my sundress family. He's a pressmate. When I first received his book, his debut book, Phantom Tongue, it just startled me with its openness, its precision of language, its seamless weaving of family and language and religion and the body as it explores and grapples with coming to terms with identity and with queer desire. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And as he says in one of his poem, which is one of my favorites in the book called What I Didn't Tell You, never forget what the Bible says. When 2 people worship together, they create a church wherever they are. I can't wait for Stephen to end our reading by taking us all to church. And here's Phantom Tongue, and here is Stephen.
Thank you so much, Donna. That was really nice. And thank you so much for creating this space. And I'm really excited to get to read alongside Fox and Katie and Anne. And Yeah, I'm just really excited. Sorry, I get really nervous, but I'm gonna jump straight into reading some poems. And I'm gonna start off with a poem actually from Bantam Tongue. This one was written in response to the Pulse nightclub shooting from the perspective of Omar Mateen, who was the shooter. The gunman. Imagine the 4 chambers of my heart, each loaded with a bullet. Each beat another revolution in my chest, my throat a barrel, my curled tongue a trigger. I believe in spirits, in every fag and queer I've heard and allowed to pass through my body and into the next. I believe in possession, believe each metal slug entering our bodies tonight is a history we can't escape, forged in factories across this country by men who feel threatened by love. And when I stare into my reflection one last time tonight, I know each pupil will become an exit wound. I've spent my life learning to lie to myself, but tonight the truth will enter my body, will hurt, will kill, will leave an echo. I'll read one more poem from Phantom Tongue, and then I'll read some newer work that I've been working on too. This one is actually the one that Donna quoted earlier. What I didn't tell you, for my brother. You can ask me anything, even about my first kiss, which was at your age and tasted like stale beer. I used to feel guilty swallowing the pulse of another man, but now I know there are many ways to pray. There's a name for that most intimate prayer, La Petite Mort, the little death. If, when your lover rakes your back, you recall the flock of worshipers surrounding you like raptors when they learned you're gay, clawing at your shoulders, squawking for salvation. Remind yourself you have to die before you can be resurrected. Never forget what the Bible says. When 2 people worship together, they create a church no matter where they are, which must include the back seat of a car or the darkest corner of Woodward Park. These are some of the things I wanted to tell you that night in April you called me for help with your history report about the gay rights movement. Neither of us admitted what he knew about the other. Instead, I started with the ancient Greeks, told you it was normal for them, that for one brief moment, they were allowed to shape their own history and religion, organizing the stars, forming Orion, for example, flexing in the sky, arms open in victory, belt hanging below his waist. But he was punished for his confidence, a scorpion's hooked tail piercing his body like a poison moon. When I see Orion, I think of you and remember what it felt like for my knuckles to sink inside your stomach, for my fist to collide with your face. Your voice, your walk, your gestures reminded me of myself, your figure bright and fluid, creating a reflection I wanted to break. And now I see your body spill open, Big Dipper hooked to your ribs, North Star nestled in the middle. I reach for that ladle and drink. Okay, this next one I think is a little bit maybe happier. It's about my favorite STI. And actually my mom is in this call, so hi mom, thanks for joining. But this one actually has a really fun history too. I don't know if anyone knows like the history of how syphilis got its name, but basically it was named by a poet. When syphilis was first spreading throughout Europe, a poet wrote a poem about it and named a character who got it syphilis. The poem got really popular And it got so popular that scientists actually ended up naming the STI syphilis in after the poem that was written about it. So I wrote an ode to syphilis. Ode to syphilis. O syphilis, noble shepherd, you condemned a god who carved your land at the troughs for steeds that gorged and left lesions in place of rivers. Apollo spread 100 red suns across your body, and they still radiate in my own skin, a universe of stars left for me to navigate. My rashes are a summer of sunsets, violet and warm to the touch, after I too took a Lord's name in vain, replaced it with the man inside my lips. Now, syphilis, whenever I swallow, a star burns down my throat like a wish, illuminates my chest where bacteria in my heart will replicate if I let them. If I believe it's just about skin and not the way an entire body can be colonized into submission so silently. Nothing undoes that kind of damage. Like the cankerous white flames sprawled over Europe after Columbus returned, acquired from the New World, scientists claim. And if that's true, dear syphilis, bless you, holy prophet, for warning us all how much we carry, for reminding me how a man throttled my neck and I prayed he would expand my pupils into night, as if I would finally see the darkness in myself, every constellation and myth I've devoured. Okay. This next poem is based on a statistic I actually came across that I guess the majority of drowning victims actually are facing the shore when that happens. And so I kind of wrote this poem kind of responding to that. Most people drown facing the shore. Brother, swim behind me. Hold my back against your chest. Because if I see you, I might push myself upon your shoulders, like that pastor who thought he'd made us straight. Panic brines my lungs. Our family laughs along the shore. I think they see me, but it's hard to tell a person is drowning. Always in silence, the body translates words into breath, voice into gasp. Fatigue sears my muscles and irons my tongue that has refused prayer since I filled your mouth with the Eucharist of my fist, the blood of Christ. Now, a grown man, I don't even know how to tread, how to trust my hands will keep me afloat, if only they'd submerge instead of grasp for you. I'm just gonna read two more poems. This next one is actually a really new poem, and just sort of my reimagining of Narcissus. From his perspective, of course, because how else can you write a Narcissus poem? Narcissus. They want you to believe I'll die by my own vanity. I kneel down to drink my reflection and coo to the man watching me. I lift him from the water, stroke his hair, tuck it behind his ears, and hold myself for the first time. I'm learning how to be tender, how being a man is an endless grief for the parts of myself I've lost and was never supposed to love. And then this will be the last poem I share tonight. And I actually wrote this poem for my partner, Clinton, who is from Tennessee, which is relevant to the poem. Elegy for your Southern twang, for Clinton. Sometimes, like an abandoned dog, it slinks back to the stoop of your tongue and waits for the door to open. For years, you trained it to heal. You've heard what gets said when whiteness is the only witness. I know what people assumed about my accent. Every time you return, you worry it will find you. I know what it's like to fear your own voice, to hear a whimper instead of a growl, for a kid to toss faggot like a meatball minced with glass, to smile instead of snarl after he spits on you and says, I hope you get AIDS. Sometimes we quiet ourselves like our shepherd who won't bark, but raises his hackles at the touch of his hind legs. His body recoils, recalls the man who slammed him against a wall. Once we saw a stray huddled in the rain. He ran before we reached him. We tell ourselves he's resilient. He doesn't need to be rescued. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Stephen. All 4 of our readers tonight, fantastic. All of them completely different, and yet really beautiful, beautiful work. We kind of went through the whole gamut of emotions this evening and types of poems. And that's what I love about hosting this series, is being able to hear those things. Thank you all so much for giving up your summer evening to be with us. In August, our readers are going to be Shelley Wong, Joan Kwan Glass, and Farnaz Fatemi, all 3 of them API women over 40 who just had their debut poetry collections come out this year. So we kind of have a whole group that's going to celebrate together, which will be great. I just want to remind you again that this reading this evening was recorded. We do have a YouTube channel where you can watch it again or watch the previous readings if you weren't able to attend. And also a reminder that, you know, I do pay my readers and welcome any tiny bit of appreciation or donation for them that you could provide. It all goes to them. I'm not like lining my pockets for book money. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop the recording so that if people want to unmute and say hello or tell everybody how amazing the poems were, they are able to do that. So thank you again so much for coming, and hopefully we will see you here again, even if the readers are not people that you've heard before. So recording.